All right. Well, welcome to our session today, modeling how to use OSM in the classroom. My name is Greg Hill, and I teach at Horn High School in Mesquite, Texas, which is just east of Dallas. I teach geography, and soon I'll be adding African American studies. And this is like my fourth or fifth year teaching or using OpenStreetMaps.
And my name is Celeste Reynolds, and I teach at Mashpee High School, where I teach AP Human Geography, current events, women's studies, and we'll be teaching U.S. history for the first time next year. So, and I've been using OpenStreetMapping for the past 5 years in my classroom.
So today our workshop objectives, we want to explain the why of mapping. That's a really big part that we feel has been a missing piece of trying to connect teachers, college professors, what have you, and educators in general, of connecting them with OpenStreetMaps. Because oftentimes you go to an OpenStreetMap workshop and you'll find this is how to do it. This is how you map buildings. But the missing piece for educators oftentimes is the why. Why should I be using this? How can I incorporate that into our curriculum? And so we hope to do that, as well as provide some real life examples of how to use OSM in your classroom. And we'd like to kind of simulate that in a classroom lesson piece, if you will, and provide some information of how, some additional resources, support mechanisms, and organizations that are out there to help you facilitate that.
So when we're looking at incorporating OpenStreetMapping in the classroom, it's important to introduce students, why, a lot of people say, why should I incorporate OpenStreetMapping? It's trying to introduce students to the OpenStreetMapping community so that they can become part of this community, not just in the classroom, but for life. Trying to get students to actively engage in actually creating maps, not consuming maps. Many times as teachers, we like to have our students consume maps, like analyze them, see what they're saying. But how about showing students how to make a map, how to contribute to a map? Is there something that you're seeing on maps that isn't there, that they would like to put on there? And I think that's really important, showing them the how. And then showing students why and how to use OpenStreetMapping. I think that that's really important, of kind of explaining, yes, this is a tool, but this is why this tool is very effective in solving problems and how it can help many communities, even their own. And then looking at trying to get students to think about ways how they can help others, not in their community, but also in the world. Especially in the time of COVID, OpenStreetMapping was a wonderful tool of helping students try to find a way to help others as they're sitting at home, help to give them kind of hope and servicing others and not leaving their home, which was really a neat way of helping students do that service learning piece. And then trying to also show students how to apply real world problems. Like here we have some real world problems. How can we solve those? And would a map help us solving those problems? And I think that that's really important. And like I've said before, any way that you can take your curriculum and apply it so that they're doing service learning and taking it and applying it to helping others is a huge advantage for your students. And then getting them civically engaged in their community and their world. And I think that that is very important for we instructors or educators to show students how they can do that.
Furthermore on the why, we are, as geographers, are spatial people. We like to think in spatial terms, and we ask spatial questions about spatial things. We often look at how people and animals and different phenomenon operate in those different spaces. And OpenStreetMap gives a great opportunity for students and educators alike to kind of not only quantify what's happening in that space, but also to kind of look at things like change over time, and you know, where are people on the map and where people aren't on the map. So we also look at the question of what happened in the case of natural disasters or some other humanitarian crisis. What happened? Where did it occur? And who and what is affected? Who are the people that are what we tend to look at as the most vulnerable? And what happens is oftentimes there are a lot of people, whether it be different populations, different sectors of society, that have the greatest need, but government maps or even corporate maps, as I like to call them, or for-profit maps, don't have their information. And so we tend to have the idea of trying to make the invisible visible. And so maps and data kind of helps us to answer those geographic questions and kind of bring the missing pieces that are missing in terms of proprietary maps and other maps. And OpenStreetMap helps us to do that. So in terms of the amount of unmapped places by continent, you can see here by this particular graphic that there is so many opportunities for students to map locally as well as globally. You know, with Africa and Asia being probably the two biggest areas that stick out on this particular graphic, but even in North America, even in Latin America, there are places that still aren't mapped. And this is not an all-encompassing number, because even still, for example, locally in Mesquite, there are new structures going up. There are 800 new homes that are going to go up within the next 5 to 10 years around our campus, and they're not even on the map. Right now, they're grasslands areas, some are agricultural lands, and soon that will change, and that stuff will need to be mapped. And plethora of uses that we could have, you know, in terms of school attendance boundaries for first responders, and mapping out their needs and putting out resources in those different areas.
So when we're looking at trying to talk to educators, we're trying to get them to think about who are the most vulnerable, because usually the most vulnerable people in the world are the people that are not mapped. And so we try to look at informal settlements, for example, refugee camps, internal displacement, over-urbanization, squatter settlements, and also rural settlements. A lot of places in the United States in rural communities are not mapped. Just a year ago, I am from a small town in Illinois, about 1,500 people, and I found out that my Mount Pulaski, Illinois was not mapped in OpenStreetMapping, and all the little towns where my friends and family live have not been mapped. So there's a lot of places, even here in the United States, that are not mapped as well. So when we're looking at missing maps and areas, there's millions and millions of the world's most vulnerable people, like I said before, that are missing and not accounted. And when we think about this, I think it's really important to kind of emphasize to our students that if people are not mapped, then they might not be put into consideration when governments or corporations are making decisions about how they're going to use that land. And I think that that's something to really think about. And so if we have this many people that are not being mapped, they're not being considered while governments are making big decisions about those areas as well as those people. And so it's also, if they're not mapped, it's very difficult to provide services and resources to those people that probably need it the most. And I think that that's something that a lot of students don't really are aware of and really think about. And this is one way to really get them to think about how many people are not mapped and how many people need to get mapped so that they can get the resources and the services that they need to live a quality of life.
And so I want to use a prime example we often use in OpenStreetMap of the why. I often use this in my classroom, and it brings it kind of brightens a lot of my students' eyes in terms of, why not just Google it? Well, a great example that's often used in the OpenStreetMap community is the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, in which it just devastated that part of the island of Hispaniola. And so, you had 1.5 million people that contribute to OpenStreetMap worldwide, but in this particular instance, hundreds of thousands of people came together. And so OpenStreetMap is a crowdsourced map of the world. If you have anybody can jump on it, anybody can volunteer their time and jump on and add and edit the map, so to speak. And so through what I like to call as participatory mapping, it creates a bridge between communities and services. And in this case, in Haiti, mappers all over the world, just at their desktop, were able to create the most, probably the best, most detailed map of Port-au-Prince to this date. And it's still used by government agencies. So when, shortly after the earthquake, the Haitian government was devastated. They were really crippled. They were crippled to begin with. I'm gonna go ahead and say that, but they were further crippled by the earthquake. They weren't able to get out services and aid to people. It was already an economically challenged country. And so the U.S. State Department, USAID, as long as branches of the U.S. military, were able to come in and using that OpenStreetMap data, were able to garner where do resources need to be, where do these resources need to go, so they could efficiently help the people. And even to this day, we're still there helping people in a variety of capacities. And so whether it be in Haiti, whether it be in Kiribati, whether it be even locally in Logan County, Illinois, participatory mapping kind of gets the kids to see, kind of goes back to what Celeste said about service learning, that they're actually doing something for someone without actually having to go there. So who is using OpenStreetMap data? You have groups like the Red Cross, who are really big users and consumers of OpenStreetMap data. They're also some of the biggest project managers. They create a lot of projects and sites like Hot OSM, Wikipedia. Facebook has developed several apps, if you will, that uses OpenStreetMap data that helps them in their particular programs, including Instagram. Microsoft is also a big player, and they've just recently partnered with Teach OSM to create, help facilitate the creation of educational modules that you as an educator, whether in the high school level or in the college level, could use in your classroom. And more of that will be coming out at teachosm.org. The New York Times, Washington Post. If you look at a lot of the maps used by Washington Post, if you look on the underlying layers and the credits, you'll see OpenStreetMap as the contributor. And probably one of my favorites is Lyft. And I use that as a great example because I can show I'm a pre-COVID, and it's something I probably said a lot this year for a lot of my lessons. Pre-COVID, this area was like this. But pre-COVID, I used Lyft quite a bit in a lot of my travels. And I was able to show my students how Lyft tracked where I was going, or they anticipated. For example, I used to go to New York quite a bit for conferences like with the American Geographical Society. And I was able to show them that Lyft kind of anticipated that, hey, are you going here? Using data from OpenStreetMaps, but also from some of my user history.
And this is just for teachers and educators who are new to OpenStreetMapping, kind of thinking of different organizations that they can look into that will provide resources and information to help get you started. And missing maps, HOT, I use HOT quite a bit in my classroom when I'm looking for projects on different topics that I can go to and start to say, hey, what's going on in the news? And I can go on to HOT and find a project. And I mostly look for beginner projects because my students are not very advanced mappers. They're usually being introduced to OpenStreetMapping. But these are, I look for beginner mapping projects that they could participate in. And we can talk about the issue. We can understand like what's going on, what does the landscape look like, why is it important to have that map, what are they needing, what are they trying to do, and what information do they need. And I think it's really a wonderful experience to kind of link that, because once students know that why, they're ready to map. They're ready to help others. They're saying, hey, we've got the technology, and we can sit here and help people for the next hour. Let's do it. And so these are different organizations that you can look into for different projects. So this one is an example of a lesson plan that I have used several times. Probably when I was first starting to use OpenStreetMapping in my classroom. The Choices program has these free lesson plans called Teaching with the News, and they tend to update these ever so once in a while. And when there was the Syrian refugee crisis, I used this. My students were asking about it. It was in the news quite a bit. We were talking about refugees in our human geography curriculum. And so I went in and started to use the Choices program, where I talked about showing statistics, like where are the refugees coming from, where are they going to, having them map it out. And then on this lesson plan, they had personal refugee stories, which was really neat, as well as videos for the students to watch. Once students really kind of started to understand that crisis, they realized, hey, there's some mapping projects. And that's what, if on the next slide, there were some mapping projects for these Syrian refugees that I was able to go on and find on the hot. And my students were able to participate mapping for the refugees. And it was really neat because the students had learned about something or in the curriculum about refugees, what are the push and pull factors of where they're going and why they're going. And then they actually kind of learned like a little case study about different refugees, why one refugee went to this country, why another refugee went to another country. And then they started to kind of have a deeper understanding. And so when we went to map, they were very excited and motivated and engaged. And I think that that's the biggest thing for a teacher, is how to engage your students. They realize that what they have learned and what they could do to actually help people on the ground really made a difference in how they were internalizing and learning about that topic.
And so now I want to turn to one of the things I like to do in my classroom is I'm an avid traveler. I like to travel for fun, but mostly I like to travel for research and to bring the real world to my classroom, so they can have kind of through a 6 degrees of separation experience. For a lot of my students will not even travel outside of the city, which is unfortunate. So I had a chance in 2015 to travel to Morocco, to not just tour Morocco, but also visit with some people in the Sahara, part of the ongoing conflict between the Sahrawi people and the government of Morocco, which you may have heard of, flared up recently as early as last spring, and it's still kind of going on today. And so we did a deep dive into the situation in the Sahara, no matter how you look at it, whether you call it the Moroccan Sahara, Western Sahara, in the Tindu camps in terms of rural settlements. And so I briefly give the students a little history about it, why of what's going on with the people. Morocco has claimed it as historically their land, and so it's controlled by Morocco, it's occupied by Morocco, administered by Morocco, and then I'll give the flip side in terms of Sahrawi people, how they fled to Algeria and protected by the Algerian government, under the guise of a group known as the Polisario Front, and then the UN's mission there. And then I further, and this is a great way to show them why we need to map this area. And so on the right, you have Google, and you'll see that there's very little imagery on Google in terms of these informal settlements. And we talk about informality of settlements, particularly in urban areas as well. And then on the left with OpenStreetMap, we'll see that these invisible people have been made visible in this same particular area. And then I talk about my travels there and meeting with Sahrawi people who were former residents of the Tindouf camps who've come back to Morocco and reintegrated back into Morocco. And then I also show the other side of showing narratives of people that are in the Tindouf camps to kind of give an even keel about that. And then we'll find some mapping projects that will assist in helping them identify the Sahrawi people. So here's one we used in my class, refugee camp boundary mapping, using the hot OSM tasking manager, which is one of my favorites and one of the great ways to find some really quick, especially urgent humanitarian projects to map in your classroom.
So many teachers will say, well, that's great. That's really cool. You're doing humanitarian mapping. How can I use it in our community? And I think that that's something that's really cool, is that if you have in your community something you would like to map, you can create your own project. So like I said earlier in the presentation, I'm originally from a small rural town called Mount Pulaski, Illinois, and I realized that my hometown was not mapped. And I talk about Mount Pulaski the entire year. My students actually laugh about it. I actually had a former student who was going to school from a girl from Chicago, Illinois, and she goes, "Oh, I know a lot about Illinois. Have you ever heard of Mount Pulaski, Illinois?" And the girl laughed at her, said, "How do you know about Mount Pulaski?" She goes, "Oh, I learned about it in human geography." So my students learn about it, and I show lots of pictures, and they found out we were talking about food deserts and trying to show them that food deserts not only happen in urban spaces, but also in rural. And what we did is we went in and started to map Mount Pulaski, Illinois. And this is kind of just showing you, I created the project with the help of Stephen Johnson from the Teach OSM team, and then explained, and the students were familiar with Mount Pulaski. They wanted to help Mount Pulaski. They interviewed several people from Mount Pulaski that were trying to revive a community garden so that they could sell these vegetables these fresh vegetables to the community. Otherwise, everyone in the community has to drive at least 15 miles to get to the closest grocery store to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So the students got to interact with some of the people in the community, and we used that as a service learning project that they got credit for through College Board. They get a little distinguished award through College Board saying they did a service learning project with the curriculum that they learned about. And it was really fun and really neat, and it had a lot of meaning for my students. So it's important for teachers to realize that if they wanted to do this in their own community, they can. Right now, we're looking at starting a new project with some students that I have, looking at my current location where I teach in Mashpee, Massachusetts, sidewalks. We've had a student that was run over by a car and killed, unfortunately. And the students are wanting to look at how can we get more accessibility through sidewalks, like making the town more walkable, so that students can get from point A to point B and to school and to the center of town safely on sidewalks. And so that's just something that, that was the students kind of looking at what they wanted to do in their community, and teachers can create their own projects, and it shows how the students can become civically engaged in their own community. This is an example of, I had a student who learned about open street mapping her freshman year. So I teach human geography to the freshmen, and over the time she wanted to start a mapathon. And I think that that's kind of really neat when educators are thinking about, why would I want to start open street mapping? What's the point? How is this? And I always say, this is something where a student learned about it her freshman year, really wanted to continue on with using open street mapping. And so at our school, we have senior seminar where students have to do a senior project. And this was a young woman who was very passionate. She wanted to do something to help others. And so she created a community mapathon. And she actually is very artistic and into the arts. And she reached out to artists who she took her topic. She found a topic that she wanted to map about, and introduced it through art, having poetry written about the topic. People sang about the topic. People danced. It was a very beautiful night, and we had over 100 people come into the auditorium, and she had kind of taken some of her classmates who had learned about open street mapping, and they were helping the older people learn how to navigate through open street mapping. So I called them my little OSM ambassadors. But it was a really neat night. And this is when people are saying, why would I want to incorporate open street mapping? It can make a difference in a student's life, that they'll continue to use it outside of your classroom.
So how to connect projects to your curriculum. One of the first things we do is look for or create a project. If you're interested in creating a project, you can contact the great folks at Teach OSM, which we are a part of, and we can help assist you in creating that project and getting it out there at task.teachosm.org, and see where is there a part of the world that you like to map, or is there a project locally? I know there's been schools in all over the country that say they wanted to map different things on their campus that aren't a part of OpenStreetMap. There's, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of development going on around our campus that my students are itching to delineate and get digitized on OpenStreetMap. And then research some background information, find out the purpose of the project, find some background articles that we've listed here, and have the kids read about what's going on. So for example, I know Celeste did one on volcanic eruption in Indonesia. So she had her students read some background information, watch some news reports from NPR and other sources. And so it clicked with these kids when they start the map, that, oh, okay, this is why we need to do it. And so once the students start mapping the project, it's really cool if you create a hashtag. This way you kind of keep track of the edits. That's one easy way you can do it. And then also you can do it with another tool, how did you contribute when OpenStreetMaps, which I will show you here using my username. Give me a second. Let me share that. Let me share my screen. And I think you should be able to see it here in about a few seconds. Well, let's see. You want to do a choose application or tab. Sorry, guys, this is a brand new platform for me, so give me a second.
Hey, Greg, we could actually see your screen when you were doing
that. Okay. Okay, cool.
So you're good.
All right, so here it is. Hopefully you guys can see it. You'll see, there we go. And so I'll drop this link in chat along with some other tools that you can use to, let me see in the chat button, where's the chat? Here, conversations. Let's see. Oh, we got a comment here from Jennings. I have a handful of animation stats on the 2020 Haiti mapping that you have to share for your use in the classroom. I love that. Please send it to my way. I'll drop my email here at the end. Thank you for that. That'd be awesome. So what I've dropped is the link to, it's called Overview of the Results Maps. And I think Pascal Nice is the guy that created this. But so the question I get a lot of times from kids is this for a grade? And so, yeah, it's for a grade. And so teachers often ask, well, how can I grade it? So one of the things I do logistically, which I'll talk about here in a second, is a little bit about logistics, is first of all, I have them set up an account. And then I like to secure their usernames. I'll have a Google form. I actually created a hyperdoc. And if you're interested in that, email me and I can send it to you. I created a hyperdoc that takes them step-by-step on. First, you need to go to openstreetmap.org. Think of a username. Come up with an email that's not a school email because our school, in their infinite wisdom, blocks OpenStreetMap. The validation part, we can use it in class, but in terms of having to go to the student's email, it's something screwed anyway. So I have them use an outside email, and I have them on a Google form put in their username and the email they use to create their OpenStreetMap account. That way, you'll have a kid that'll come in on next Friday. Oh, I forgot what my username is. I don't remember what email it is. And I'll have it right there, and we can kind of mitigate that. And so once we're done, say, okay, kids, you need to do 50 edits today, or 100 edits, or however many edits it is. And so kind of a cool thing is I can first take their username, plot it in here, and search, and I use my own here, and I can look at today. I did a workshop earlier this morning, and I can see that I did 2 chain sets. And it'll show, the latest and greatest as I scroll down. And there's a lot more in here that you can mitigate using this. If I go to results map, there are a lot more bells and whistles and tools. One of my students' favorites is OSM Fight. And I'll give a minute for that to kind of pop up. Let me, I don't know if it went to that. Nope, it didn't shift to it. Let me change that really quick. Share, Google tab. Learning on the fly here, guys, learning on the fly. All right, so here's OSM Fight. This is my students' favorite thing to do. They always, after we get done doing a project, they want to see who had the most edits, or they want to go against their best bud. So I'm going to put my arch nemesis in OSM in there, who is on this call, and click on Fight. And it will populate with some different categories.
Greg and I are good friends, and we have a competition of who's going to get to advanced mapper.
Yeah.
So first it was intermediate, now it's advanced. And
so for months, she would win, and now I don't know, maybe because of recent mapping my students, I am forged ahead in doing that. So that's another cool thing, and it also is a good motivator for kids to actually do good work. Another thing I also tell my students is Big Brother is watching, and so I had an incident where a student mapped a 40,000-foot waterfall in a place where there's no water. And I tell the kids, hey, this is life and death. This is not a playroom. So We're doing real work here. We're doing real geography, so to speak. And if I could share another screen here, another way I can use to check, particularly on my own projects. Let me stop sharing that. And then share this other tab. There it is. This is a project I created within Teach OSM in Western Maryland. I used it with the Maryland Geographic Alliance. Is scroll down and use change sets in OSM CHA, which is a great tool again to gauge who did what. You know, there's a lot of great tutorials on how to use OSM CHA and other things. It shows, you know, when I did this particular workshop a couple hours ago, you'll see who did what. And the good thing is, you know, my good friend Melly doesn't mind. It shows you exactly what they did and where they did it. It'll take a minute to kind of populate with my slow computer. Hopefully. But you get the idea. It'll show you exactly what they did and where they did it. Maybe this one will work. Let's see here. Nope. It's taking forever. But anyway, you get the idea. I'm a stop sharing my screen with that and go back to our main. For first, are there any questions whatsoever? You can drop them in chat. Any comments? Any resources you may want to add? All right, we'll have some time at the end. If you come up with something, please can't talk words. Please feel free to throw those in there, if you will. We're just glad you guys are here on this fine Saturday morning. So that's kind of some of the things, and it kind of leads into the next slide. Again, you know, setting up usernames and securing those usernames takes a lot of headache out of, you know, I forgot what my username is. You know how, especially in ninth grade, we primarily teach ninth graders. My seniors really don't have that problem, but ninth graders, oh my God. And then training, we talk about best practices all the time. I include some of the training videos that are out there, whether it be with MatGive and Hot OSM has some great training videos out on YouTube. Teach OSM has some training modules that are coming out pretty soon. We're revamping a lot of those, so look forward to those. And we'll talk a little bit more about Teach OSM coming up here in a minute. Actually, here we are. So all right. So here are a couple of resources, additional resources. Again, starting with Teach OSM. If you go to teachosm.org, we provide a lot of lesson plans for teachers. We're starting to update a lot of those, especially with the update to the AP Human Geography CED class and exam description, which is kind of the guidepost for how teachers teach that course. We also offer tutorials on how to use OSM. I had mentioned before, we have a new partnership with Microsoft, in which we're trying to develop some class modules for teachers themselves who don't want to necessarily have time to come to a long workshop or whatever. They can do it at their own time. We also have weekly MAPI hours hosted by the American Geological Society. And this is where teachers can come and get immersed in a really relaxed and easygoing way. You know, you can bring your favorite beverage and just have a great time with other educators. And then we also mentor teachers on how to use OSM and can come to your classroom and help you in that endeavor.
And I want to add too that a lot of times we understand when teachers are learning a new technology, it's kind of difficult if you feel like you don't have a good handle on that technology. So MAPI hours is a very wonderful way for teachers to come in, you know, get familiar with logging into your OpenStreetMapping account and making sure, you know, and working on building, you know, creating buildings, or doing streets, or doing points. I know that every time I go to a Mappy Hour, I'm learning something new about how to manipulate the tools in OpenStreet mapping, and it makes me more confident as I'm introducing it to my students, that I have a strong handle on the technology, and making sure that if a student is asking me a question about how do I do this, or I did this, and what did I just do, and I have the answers. I know that when we have to introduce new technology and we don't know a lot about it, we don't feel very confident of introducing it. So the Mappy Hours gives you a chance to get more comfortable and think about how you could use it. And I think that that's very, very important for educators to really and a wonderful relaxed time to get more familiar with OpenStreet mapping, so that you can introduce it to your students in the classroom. The other thing, American Geographical Society has a teachers fellow, and this is a great opportunity for teachers to apply, because there is where I know Greg and I learned more about OpenStreet mapping. I think that they're going to go back live next year, and they have an entire morning where you can meet the Teach OSM team, and you can learn about how to use buildings, and you can ask them all sorts of questions. You can still, it's wonderful even if you already know OpenStreet mapping, but it's also another opportunity for you to ask lots of questions and get yourself familiar with it, and how to use it within your curriculum. And then the last thing too is Greg and I have talked to the Teach OSM committee, and they were looking to like, hey, we'd like to start an after-school program. And this was something that Greg and I have also talked about, because we realize that sometimes teachers are afraid to learn new technology or incorporate it, but sometimes the students aren't. The students want to do something like that, and sometimes the students can push the teachers to try to integrate new technology or bring something new to their school. So we started this organization called OSM Teen Maptivist. And this is where we're trying to, once again, it's new, and Greg and I decided that we wanted to open it up to teenagers across the United States, try to introduce them what OpenStreet mapping is, why they would want to learn about OpenStreet mapping, and then get them familiar just to like how to use OpenStreet mapping. So we've been having monthly Mappy Hours, where we have a guest mapper who actually uses OpenStreet mapping in their line of work. And that has been really helpful, because I know I can say, oh, you can use OpenStreet mapping for this or that or this or that. And my students hear me talking about it all the time, but to have other people talk about how they're using it within their line of work has really opened their eyes. Like, wow, Mrs. Reynolds, you keep talking about it, but now I'm really starting to see how OpenStreet mapping is a wonderful tool and how I can help others. I had one student just say to me after one of the Mappy Hours, I never thought about going into geography and international affairs or Peace Corps. And I actually have found doing Mappy Hours is very relaxing, and I learn a lot. So Greg and I have been doing those, but we're hoping to build it so that eventually different high schools can have different chapters. So my school and Greg's school could do a mapathon together. We're looking to, an organization where they could have their own community mapathons, where they would bring everybody in their community. And just trying to get students engaged. And maybe that would be a wonderful way of getting their teachers to start incorporating it into their classroom as well. Saying, hey, Mr. Hill, we found this was going on, and and we'd like to map crosswalks. We've noticed that in OpenStreet mapping, we don't have some major crosswalks in our community that are mapped. We'd like to have a mapping project where we're doing crosswalks, and having those students take the initiative in their community, but also in the world. And so this is where we're looking for OpenStreet mapping professionals, people who are using it, if they would be interested in joining us. We usually ask people to speak about 20-25 minutes, talking about kind of their background and how they're using OpenStreet mapping, and then provide some type of project that goes along with their talk. And we get the students on there, and they can do some mapping. And I always like to talk about this because, Greg and I are saying, well, this is mostly the why. We're trying to get them why you should map, because if a teenager is not convinced why they need to do something, they will not do it. I've had students where I've introduced OpenStreet mapping, but I haven't emphasized the why, and they just will sit there and not map. But I have found that it's a hard sell, but if I sell it right and I really sell the why to them, then they'll be mapping all day, and they'll map anytime I ask them to map. So I think that that's really important for teachers, especially at the high school level, to know. And the more that they meet people that are using it and how it's being used, the more motivated that they will be when you're doing the process of mapping. So. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We want to thank you guys for coming today. Here's our contact information if you want to take a screenshot of it, screen capture. I'll also drop it in the chat if you just want to grab it from there. And, reach out to us if you have any suggestions, if you have any questions. We're here to help. We would just want to make this a better place for OpenStreetMaps. And Celeste, any parting words?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. Greg and I are very passionate about trying to help teachers incorporate OpenStreet mapping into their classroom. We feel like it has really elevated our instruction and helped our students in so many ways. And we see it, it's exciting because our students come back to us from college and they get really excited that thank you for introducing us to this opportunity. And so we want to really stress that it might be frightening and sometimes you don't necessarily understand how to do it. But if you need that extra support, we will be happy to help you. Stephen Johnson from the Teach OSM committee is fabulous. He will help people out setting up new projects. If you have questions, he's so helpful and available and supportive. But the thing is that there's a lot of different ways to get involved, and you will really elevate your teaching and get in student engagement, which I think is one of the best things that we can do as educators. So thank you.
And there's also a Teach OSM Slack. There's a Teach OSM Facebook. There's Teach OSM Twitter. Teach OSM Instagram. So you can't get us those ways, any of those other ways, feel free to reach out to us through social media.